You know how World War I gets boiled down to that one gunshot in Sarajevo? Yeah, Archduke Franz Ferdinand gets popped, alliances kick in, and boom, millions dead in the mud. But what if I told you the real spark wasn't a bullet? It was a checkbook. A handful of bankers, huddled in smoke-filled rooms from London to New York, scribbled loans worth billions in today's money that turned a Balkan squabble into the bloodiest mess humanity ever cooked up. And the kicker? They funded both sides. Stick around, because by the end, you'll see why your history textbook skipped this, and how it echoes in every war debt we fight today. All right, let's rewind to 1914. Europe's a powder keg. Nationalism's raging, militaries are flexing, and yeah, that assassination lights the fuse. But peel back the propaganda posters, and you will find something way more sinister. A financial arms race that had been brewing for decades. I'm talking empires drowning in debt from gobbling up colonies, gold standards creaking under the weight of industrial greed, and a web of secret treaties that weren't about borders. They were about bottom lines. Picture this. Britain and France, the old guard, sitting on massive colonial halls in Africa and Asia, sucking in raw materials like rubber and oil to feed their factories. But they're leveraged to the hilt. Debts from endless imperial adventures piling up. Germany? The upstart, industrial powerhouse, late to the colonial party, desperate for scraps in Morocco and the Middle East to fuel its steel mills. Russia and Austria-Hungary? Crumbling giants, borrowing just to keep their multi-ethnic empires from fracturing. And pulling the strings? Not kings or kaisers, but the merchant banks of the City of London. Rothschilds, Barings, Morgans, lending at rates that'd make a loan shark blush. By 1914, the global economy is this fragile web tied to the gold standard. Every nation's currency backed by bullion, meaning one hiccup in trade or tariffs, and gold flows out like blood from a wound. Imperial rivalries weren't just ego trips, they were economic lifelines. Britain blocks German ships in the North Sea. That's not Navy games, that's starving Berlin's exports, crashing their banks. And here's the mind blower we're unpacking today. These financial feuds didn't just make war inevitable, they financed it. From J.P. Morgan's $500 million lifeline to the Allies that tipped U.S. neutrality, to Germany's desperate gold grabs from its own allies. But wait, did these bankers know what they were unleashing? Or was it just business? Hang tight, the receipts are coming and they're wilder than you think. The big reveal? One loan that changed everything is buried deeper than a trench. Let's start at the root. Imperialism wasn't some noble quest for glory. It was a cash grab, plain and simple. By the late 1800s, Europe as great powers had carved up Africa like a Thanksgiving turkey. Britain snagging Egypt and South Africa for cotton and gold. France digging into Indochina for rubber. Germany elbowing in late with Tanganyika and Namibia for phosphates. Why? Their factories were belching smoke 24/7, churning out steel rails and rifles. But they needed cheap resources to keep profits fat. Colonies meant free-ish labor, locked-in markets, and raw stuff shipped back to Manchester or Berlin. But here's the rub. And it's a doozy. Building these empires wasn't cheap. Railways through jungles, forts and deserts, wars with locals who didn't fancy being colonized, all on the government's dime, which meant borrowing big from private banks. Britain, the sun never sets champ, owed billions in bonds by 1900, much of it to those five titans of the city. Rothschilds, with their web-spanning Paris to Vienna, Barings, who'd just survived their own Argentine debt fiasco, and P. Morgan across the pond, eyeing Europe like a kid in a candy store. These weren't public loans. They were sweetheart deals, collateralized by future colonial taxes. France? Their North African push left Paris bankers like the Crédit Lyonnais sweating over Ottoman-style debt administrations that basically turned empires into ATMs for lenders. Germany felt the squeeze hardest. United just in 1871, they were playing catch-up, their navy budget ballooning to rival Britain's, while colonies like Togo barely paid for themselves. By 1913, Berlin's external debt hit 20 billion marks, funneled through the Reichsbank and private houses like Deutsche Bank. And Russia? Tsar Nicholas was borrowing from French banks to arm against the Ottomans, racking up 6 billion francs in bonds that made St. Petersburg a puppet on Paris's string. It sounds like Monopoly gone mad, right? But laugh if you want. This debt pyramid was teetering. Tariffs spiked trade wars. Britain's splendid isolation meant squeezing German exports, which crashed Berlin's gold reserves. One bad harvest in the colonies, one rebellion in India, and the whole system's one default from chaos. These weren't sideshows, they bred paranoia. Kaiser Wilhelm II wasn't just paranoid about encirclement, he was staring at bankruptcy if Britain choked his African roots. And the banks? They loved it. More tension meant more loans, higher interest. By 1914, Europe's economy was a house of cards, each king holding a mortgage from the same lenders. But how'd this tip into total war? Enter the gold standard. the invisible handcuffs that turned rivalries into do or die. Okay, deep breath. Time to talk the gold standard. Sounds boring, like something from an econ textbook, but this was the financial doomsday machine that locked Europe into war. Since the 1870s, every major power pegged their currency to gold. 1 pound, 1 mark, 1 franc, all redeemable for a fixed chunk of the shiny stuff. It kept trade smooth, prices stable, until it didn't. Why? Gold's finite. Wars, famines, strikes, anything disrupting mining or trade meant gold outflows, currency crashes, and panic. Britain hoarded 40% of the world's bullion in 1914, thanks to colonial pours from South Africa and Australia. Germany, scraping by with Reichsbank vaults half empty after naval buildups. When tensions flared, like the 1911 Agadir crisis over Morocco, where France and Germany nearly dueled over phosphates, the gold started fleeing. Banks jacked rates to lure it back, strangling credit for farmers and factories. Can you imagine? A Berlin baker can't get a loan because the Kaiser's yacht fleet drained the reserves. This wasn't abstract, it hit bellies. Unemployment spiked, bread riots brewed, and the fix? More colonies for more gold mines. But colonies were zero-sum. Grab Morocco, and France seethes, borrows more from Rothschilds to arm up. Now, layer on the secrets. You think alliances were just handshakes? Nah, they were IOUs wrapped in classified envelopes. Bismarck's reinsurance treaty of 1887, top-secret pact with Russia promising neutrality unless France got hit, kept hidden to avoid spooking Austria. Fast forward to 1915's Treaty of London. Britain, France, Russia bribe Italy with chunks of Austria and Albania for jumping ship from the Central Powers. Secret clause? A $50 million loan, plus war spoils shares. And don't get me started on the Sykes-Picot Agreement, carving Ottoman lands like a pie, all hush-hush to divvy oil fields post-victory. These weren't diplomacy. They were venture capital for carnage, with banks underwriting the bonds. Germany, boxed out, turned inward, lending to Austria-Hungary, grabbing 71% of their debt by 1918 and stripping their gold vaults bare. It was parasitic finance. Berlin bankrolled Vienna's war machine while siphoning bullion to plug its own holes. The emotion hits hard here. Millions marched to die, but it was gold clerks in Frankfurt calling the shots. And if you're feeling that righteous anger bubbling, good, because we're at the midpoint. And here's where it gets really twisted. One American banker steps in with a loan so massive, it doesn't just fund the war, it forces a neutral giant to pick a side. What was it? And who pulled the trigger? You won't believe the name. Whew, if this web of gold and greed is hitting you like it did me, exposing how a few fat cats turned rivalries into rivers of blood, do me a solid, smash that like button if you're raging about these hidden hustles, and subscribe for more unfiltered history that schools forgot. Turn on notifications too, because next up, we're cracking open WWI's Banker Playbook. Your support keeps these truths alive. Thanks for riding this far. Now, let's finish unraveling the thread that snapped the world in two. All right, cliffhanger payoff. Enter J.P. Morgan Jr., the Wall Street colossus who turned neutrality into a punchline. When war erupted in 1914, America was supposed to sit it out. Wilson preached peace. Public yawned. But Morgan? He smelled profit. From day one, his firm became the Allies' personal shopper. $3 billion in munitions, food, steel, all funneled through J.P. Morgan & Co. as exclusive agent. That's over $80 billion today, folks. A single 1915 loan, $500 million to Britain and France. The biggest foreign bond issue ever. Rothschilds chipped in from London, wiring funds to keep Paris afloat. Why risk it? Neutrality be damned. Morgan's partners knew a German win meant defaulted debts. By 1916, Britain was bankrolling everyone. Italy's full tab, 2/3 of France and Russia's. Gold reserves, drained. Overseas investments, pawned. Private credit, maxed. Enter Uncle Sam. Morgan lobbied Wilson hard, whispering that Allied collapse tanks U.S. exports. The Nye Committee later grilled him. Turns out these loans tied America's hands. Default on Morgan's billions? Economic Armageddon. So in 1917, doughboys shipped out, not just for democracy, but to safeguard Wall Street's ledger. Germany tried countering. Secret pacts with the Ottomans for gold shipments, propping up Vienna with 3.5 billion marks in credits. But it backfired. Reichsbank notes tripled, inflation loomed. Central banks, fresh off the press like the Fed in 1913, suspended gold convertibility, printing fiat like confetti. No more rules of the game, just endless debt monetization. The war cost $288 billion total. Taxes covered peanuts, bonds, sold on patriotism, bought by grannies and kids. But who cashed in? The houses of Morgan and Rothschild, raking commissions while trenches filled with the poor. It's gut-wrenching, isn't it? Letters from the front talk mud and mates lost. But back home, boardrooms toasted, victory loans. The human cost? 16 million dead, empires shattered. Yet the financial web endured. U.S. emerged creditor king, London dethroned, but still scheming. This wasn't accident, it was architecture. So, as the guns fell silent in 1918, the ledgers didn't balance, they broke the world. Versailles wasn't peace, it was a debt trap reloaded, with reparations chaining Germany to hyperinflation and Hitler's rise. That Sarajevo bullet, catalyst, but the real battle, fought in vaults where gold trumped glory and loans outlasted lives. We've romanticized the trenches, but the true horror's here. Ordinary folks, your great-grandpa in the mud, mine shell-shocked in no man's land, sacrificed for spreadsheets. Next time you hear war to end all wars, remember, it was the war that minted modern finance. The Rothschilds and Morgans didn't fire shots, but their ink drew the maps of misery. And today, echoes in every sanctions tweet, every IMF bailout. If this flipped your script on history, drop a comment. What's the shadiest financial move you've spotted in modern wars? Hit subscribe. We're just scratching the surface. Thanks for watching.